everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today we're answering your travel questions. So, hey, Cindy, and
Hey,
we
April.
both have questions.
Yeah.
So, the first question I have is from Sarah. So, where do you suggest looking for low cost or free tours?
That's
That's an ongoing question, don't you think, Cindy?
it is. And it really kind of depends on where you're going, right? Like that's sort of one of the challenges is what's available in the city or the country that you're traveling to. But I mean, some of the old standbys are like that. It's like free tours on foot or something like that, or
Yep.
free tour by foot. That's a good place. They have lots of things all across the country, and I think even in other places. Tours by locals, right?
Yep, tours by locals are often low cost. I always suggest too, like checking out, depending on where you go, like if it's say it's a big city like London, New York, San Francisco, go to the city website. Sometimes on the city website, a travel organization, the city itself is offering like a free walking tour or an orientation tour, something that's unique to that city. Even in small, I was finding
Right.
even in like Montana, places you wouldn't expect.
Yeah,
And
that's a
then
really good suggestion. Like even doing like the local library might have a tour, and you'd be surprised. You might not think I want to tour this library in this little tiny town, but you'd be surprised what you might learn. And they know stuff, right? So they know the city history and
yeah, they
stuff.
really do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
they have
I've
some fun offerings too. That's a great suggestion, Cindy, because I've done that too. I'll just keep Googling and like maybe it's the library or a historic organization in that town, and they'll have some really fun things.
right.
The
I mean,
other one I've come up with is, go ahead.
I was gonna say I've even toured the city hall here in Los Angeles. I think it's a $10 tour, or maybe it's even free. It's really economical, and it's with the city. The city does it. They put it on, and the reason I did the tour was because it's. I think you can go up to the atrium at the very top. It's the only way you
Oh,
can get up there, but you have this beautiful view of the city from within the city, which is not a normal thing. And you get all this history of City Hall when it was built and so forth. So it's a lot of fun to just choose those civic places and see
right.
what they have to offer instead of looking for like a special tour, if that makes sense, and a tour organization.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just like we both Cindy and I have taken the library in downtown Los
Right.
Angeles, and who would guess that a library would be so filled with art? There's a lot of unique
Right.
art. Yeah, and the elevators and just the way the building was designed, and then just they throw in some of the history of the town that you wouldn't have even probably known about if you didn't take the tour. And that one was free, if I recall. We just met a
Yes.
docent.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of places do those kinds of things. Like Union Station does a tour also, which is another thing. And you can do those things in other cities, just looking at their train place and finding those. And another, I mean, obviously a good resource is things like TripAdvisor. I always look there to see what people are saying, and see what's available, what people have done. It's a little sketchy when you don't know if it's a tour company, but if you get good reviews and you can actually chat, if I can get on TripAdvisor and they have a little dialogue with somebody who's used a private tour guide, that helps me
Yeah.
feel more comfortable. And those are usually pretty economical. And Airbnb Experiences has a lot of cool stuff now too, which is another great
Oh,
place to look for
that
stuff.
is a
Yeah.
great place too. And I've
Yeah.
also found like doing research, like major companies, like when you go to New England, they're known for like maple syrup and things like that. And
Yeah.
in Colorado, I think it's near Boulder, Celestial Seasonings Tea Company.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really cool. You can tour their facility and then get to sample the tea. Or in New England, they want to sample the maple syrup and they tell you the history. So a lot of good
Right.
fun things to do that way too.
Yeah, that's actually a really good tip because there's a lot of interesting facilities, whether they're making or building or doing something in that area. And those places often have economical tours, things like also tastings, right?
Yeah,
Beyond like
tastings.
wine tasting, you can also taste beer and you can taste tea and you can taste other things because they're trying to sell it. I think when I was in Belize, I actually did, I took a rum tour in a place where they
Ooh,
make rum, and it was such a cool thing. I had it was a very private tour because not very many people do it, but I was like, this is so fun. I get to see it, and then they gave me all these free samples, so it was definitely worth the
right.
trip,
Oh,
right?
I know. I
It's
love the
great.
foodie tours. Those are great. And often,
uh,
like you said, they're very economical because they want to introduce their product or let you sample like the
right.
local restaurants, so it's a win-win, and they throw
Right.
in some history. You can ask a local then questions. I know in Paris, I think I took one that had to do with the bakeries, and same thing. Then afterwards, you could ask the woman like, where would she recommend eating or places she would see.
Right, right. And starting with something like the library tour or the civic building tours, those are usually local docents that are doing those tours. So they might even know of other places to get that kind of a tour. So that was a really great question. And we had lots of answers. I mean, they're not all free, but there's some really economical things and different ways to look for travel. I have another question. Angie asks, do you have any suggestions on where to go for your first solo trip? Um,
Ew, that's a good
and
question.
I do. I took my first solo trip to Belize, and part of the choice there was that they speak English and they use the American dollar. So I was personally trying to minimize the amount of stress that I would have. And language is sometimes a concern, and then always like counting, do I know how much this is going to cost? And knowing that I was going to be alone, I didn't want to have too many things that was making me uncomfortable. So Belize was a really good choice. Plus, it was economical from the States and from California. The flight was pretty inexpensive. Um, but I don't know that you need to. I wouldn't say everybody should go to Belize on their first trip, although it was beautiful. But I would choose some place that's different, but not too different. I think that if you've not traveled alone, that's one of the things to keep in mind is how much outside your comfort zone do you want to be on the whole trip,
Right,
and
right.
that will make a difference. So if you're really uncomfortable being alone, you might want to try traveling alone in your own country a little
Yeah, that's what
first.
I was gonna suggest. If it's your first solo trip before you like jump across, to another country or something like that, maybe try going to a city. I think cities are great places
Yes.
as a solo trip because you can stay in a central location, maybe like, if it's New York or Boston, and then you don't have to rent a car. You don't have to worry about that. You can take public transportation or
Right.
walk, and you're still can, you don't have the language, you don't have the money issue, those types of things, but you get more comfortable, get your feet wet first before going
Yeah.
longer places. And you'll probably find that, maybe you'll see more things on your own that are geared to what your interests are because you're not having to like make plans with someone else. So there's a lot
Right.
of
And
pros to taking a solo trip.
yeah, traveling alone is a whole experience in itself as far as the adventure and what you learn about yourself. Um, but definitely finding ways to minimize your exposure and your concern about being alone. And you also need to kind of figure out if you like to be around other people, because I like to travel in all capacities. Like I like to go to hostels where I'm surrounded by people, but I also like to go rent a small Airbnb where I'm completely by myself for a few days. And I need a little bit of both of those, but some people need a lot of one or the other. So thinking about, being on a tour, some people think that's a great way to start. Is just pick a tour and be out with people. Um, but if you get overstimulated with being around a lot of people, that can be very overwhelming, and then you're not getting that private personal time and you don't have time to recharge. So I think really thinking about yourself. But countries like Belize, England is a great choice. Paris, especially places where
Oh,
there's lots of
definitely.
tourists, like you said,
Right.
the big cities and so forth.
Yeah, I agree. And if you're more comfortable with being alone, I think some of the national parks are good choices too in the United States because again, you can stay in one spot. You can either camp but you still have, opportunities where you're not totally, if you needed something or needed someone, you're not
Right,
completely isolated. So you can kind of get a mix.
right. That's a great question.
All right. So I've got another question from
Okay.
Michelle, and she's asking about the best places to book airline tickets and maybe best days to purchase. That's always a moving target, but I think
Yes.
ultimately 100% I would definitely, I check prices on things like, Expedia, Momondo, Price Grabber. Those are good places to kind of get an idea what the prices are running and maybe if
Right.
there's better days to travel or not travel. But I still ultimately think it's best to book your airline ticket directly through the airline because then
Mhm.
if something goes wrong, you can reach out directly to them by phone, get a real person on the phone and have a conversation and have a better means of maybe getting refunded should something go wrong. That's
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
kind
And
of
that's been
leaning
my
toward.
experience too. I definitely try all those, the whole myriad of whatever's out there today, Expedia and beyond, as far as finding where the best deals are. And then if I can, I purchase the ticket directly from the airline for all those reasons that you mentioned, April. Sometimes it's
Yeah,
not possible because, I mean, how those systems work is, right, they United or whoever gives so many discounted tickets to these
right,
brokerage, and then they are able to get them given to us at a really great discount. So sometimes that's the only way to get that price is
right.
right through that service. And I've definitely booked through all of those services for those tickets. But if it's a big overseas trip, like you suggested, April, I typically would rather go through the airline. I also always check the airline anyway, because I have found that the ticket prices that I'm getting on those sites is not necessarily the best deal I can get from the website direct. So going directly
Right,
to the United
right.
site or the American Airlines or whatever, Air France, especially if you're traveling overseas, there's lots of different airlines to choose from. And I have a tip for how to find who flies in there. This has been a challenge for me sometimes because you go to those websites and you say you want to go from here to Paris, for example, and then they have a tendency just to show you what's popular.
Oh, right, right.
So I will go to the website for the airport I want to fly to, and then I
Excellent
look and
idea.
see on the airport's website will typically tell you who flies in and out of there, so what
Right.
airlines are flying in and out of there, and so then I can go directly to their website. That's how I got a cheap ticket to Vietnam, because I went on China Air, which I would not have chosen. I mean, who would have thought that? But I just started going down that list of all the airlines that fly in and out of that particular airport, and was able to find a ticket that was within a price that I thought I could handle. So that's a great way to find out. I
That
mean,
is,
obviously,
yeah.
they have to come to your airport also, but
Right. Yeah, but that is a great way to find out which airlines, because some of the lower cost airlines, as we know, like Southwest, for example, isn't going to be on those aggregate sites. Like Southwest doesn't
right, they don't
have
go
their
there.
prices, they don't go there. And you might be able to pick up a great price. Some of these low cost airlines are continually adding new routes, Frontier,
Right,
Southwest, all of them. And especially internationally, there's
right.
small airlines that only fly these certain routes, but they will come to major airports here in the United States, and it may
Hmm.
pay off to find out which ones those are.
Yeah, and when I was in Vietnam, we did an inter-country flight, and I wanted to book it ahead of time because we had a boat tour we were taking. And when I was looking online, they were only giving me like the big international ones. And we ended up booking on a smaller local airline, because that's what I did. As I went online and found the airlines that go to those different airports and was able to find one. Of course, I had to use Google Translate to translate the website because it was all
Oh,
in Vietnamese so I could figure out what I was buying. But I saved myself a ton of money by being able to book it that way. So lots of great ways to do that.
yeah, that's a great tip.
Okay, I have another question. This one's from Jocelyn, and she says, how do you know if a travel destination is safe?
Ooh.
Well,
Well, that's kind of up for discussion. I mean, first place is always maybe to check the State Department's
right,
website. But again, if, living in the United States, as we all know, they have these countries, they have these ratings, and what one person's idea of dangerous may be different from, if you live in like LA, New York, Chicago, we get used to just we have domestic issues here. So
right, right. And
I think it depends on reading those and seeing what those different levels are, and maybe what the specific threats are, and kind of weighing your comfort against that.
right. Right. And I mean, my guideline has been because I want to go everywhere. That's my first thing. There's no place on the planet that I don't want to visit. But there are places that I may not want to visit right now because of the situation in their country. And I look at whether or not their government has control over their people. Right. So there are
Hmm.
countries where they're having a lot of um, uprising and rebels and
Right.
things that are doing things, and the government itself is having a hard time controlling their own citizens. Um, so I would shy away from those places no matter what the State Department is saying, just because I, want to make sure that wherever I'm at, they can at least control the citizens that they have there. We obviously have those problems here too.
Right.
So it is, like you said, it's a judgment call to figure that out. But it is something to check frequently, because a city or a country that is currently very, very safe today, next week might start to have a problem.
Oh, exactly. Exactly.
Which is why I sign up on the STEP program as soon as I know I'm going to go somewhere. Even before I book my ticket or anything, I go and sign up, and then they start sending you notifications every time the threat is changed.
Right. You immediately get emails continually, which
Right.
is really helpful of what's happening, or if there's strikes, like if it's going to affect transportation, like trains and those
Right.
types of things even are listed. The
Yeah.
other thing might be to, like, we have all of these like groups. If anyone's on Facebook,
Right.
go into some of those travel groups and connect with like locals in these places and ask them directly, how they feel about their country or what's happening, to get a better feel.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And also checking for things like what not to do and what's not safe. Because there are some places where it's very westernized and it feels a lot like the US. And so just about everything you can think of that you would do, you can do there. But other places, they might say, oh, don't do public transportation. I'm a big fan of public transportation. I use it everywhere I possibly can. But there are countries where that may, or cities where that may or may not be super safe. So you would shy away from that. And understanding how that works, how taxis work and how car rides work, because those things can all be different. Again, there's not any place I wouldn't go as long as there was some control within their country. But I know a lot of other people, like you said, if you're not from Los Angeles or from New York or haven't spent a lot of time in a large city, those places can feel quite intimidating to somebody who hasn't been there and spent a lot of time there. It doesn't mean it's not safe. It just feels unsafe.
Right.
And your insecurity about feeling that way will change how you behave, which then makes it even more likely that something will happen. So you want to have that confidence.
Yeah, confidence, I think, is a big factor. And if you're already feeling unsure of yourself, it's like any other situation, being around pets, or you kind of just radiate, I think, if you're like unsure. Yes. And that's why talking to someone that lives locally and maybe doing some research, reading, like going, even some of the guidebooks sometimes will list like, don't wear, we were talking to one of our travelers and she mentioned about wearing certain colors, or just to blend in, do things that again make you feel you want to blend in. That's the biggest thing. The more you stick out, and whether that's LA, even in the United States, you're going to be viewed as a target. So finding out even the best neighborhood. I mean, people go to Mexico all the time, even though a lot of people, Mexico's on the list of do not travel, but there are places in Mexico that are probably perfectly safe if you know where to stay, what neighborhoods, and doing some more in-depth research.
Right. And that's a good point, because in some places it's good to get out of that kind of touristy area. Yeah. I mean, I know that when I go to Paris, I'm a big fan. I love Paris, but when you're in those places that are full of tourists, there's a lot of pickpockets. There's a lot of crime happening there, because like you said, all of these people are new, they're not paying attention, they've got disposable income, they're, that's what's happening. So that makes that group a big target, which brings the crime to that area. So if you go out into a smaller like country village out in France, you're going to have less of that, ton less of that kind of experience. So thinking about that and how it's safe. But I think our best tip was just using the STEP program with the State Department here in the United States is one of the best things to do, to make sure you know.
Right, exactly. So we got another question. Eric asks, where to go? Let's see, I've got it right here. Where to go that you don't need to rent a car? Oh my gosh, from Eric.
Everywhere.
There's everywhere technically you can go that has public transportation. In the United States, there are places, if you're way out, you are going to need to rent a car. There's not going to be maybe Uber in upstate Maine, or, even upstate New York. It might be a little bit far-fetched, but, depending on where you are, there's trains, you can walk. So any of the cities are fabulous places to go. And I love going to places that you don't need to rent a car. You just you see so much more when you can explore by foot, or like in Paris, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
taking the public transportation.
Why would you rent a car
Yeah.
in Paris? Why? And in any large city, I mean, renting a car in a large city is just crazy. Even in Los Angeles, honestly, like just take, public transportation or an Uber from place to place and get out and walk, like you said, because you see so much more on foot. And in New York and Boston and Philadelphia, like all of those cities are super walkable. But when I went to Belize, I'll bring that one back up. I did not rent a car. And I was all over the country. And I hired a driver, which is what they do there, to drive me from one city to the other. But once I got into the little tiny village, I just stayed there and I walked everywhere. I walked for hours and hours and really enjoyed walking the little village that I was in. And then I took a car and moved to the next location. I think really for me, the only time I need to rent a car is when I'm trying to hop, right? Go from city to city. And like when you mentioned Maine and that sort of thing, if there's one or two towns up there, just go
Right.
there.
Yeah, just go
right?
there. Yeah.
And then walk around and then get a train or bus or something to the next place. I think you'll definitely enjoy the experience more. But the best rule of thumb, like you said, is large cities, right? Where they have public transportation.
Exactly.
Then you pretty much can just
Yeah, and right, I agree. If I'm gonna go, even I just recently talked to someone that went to Key West, and she said how much she enjoyed, like they didn't rent a car, they stayed, and they had bicycles. She stayed at an Airbnb that had bicycles, and they spent the whole trip like exploring by bicycle and, walking to the, just down where the shops were, the restaurants, and, meeting the locals. You interact. I think you get more from your experience if you don't have to rent a car.
I agree. As a matter of fact, I'm going to challenge everyone on this who's listening to take one day, at least one whole day, if not a whole trip where you don't rent a car, and just force yourself to take public transportation. A lot of people are intimidated by that, but I would tell you that that makes you talk to locals, because you have to stop somebody and go, which way is this going? And you have to, interact with people. You get on a bus or on the subway with people who are going back and forth to work, taking their kids to school, so you have more of a authentic experience.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So it's if you've never done that, if you've kept yourself in your rental car when you travel, you're keeping yourself in a
excuse me.
You're keeping yourself in a bubble. So get out of your bubble, your car, and go explore the world.
Right, exactly.
Okay, this is a good one, even along the lines of transportation. This is from Ashley. She asks, hop on, hop off buses, yay or nay? Do we like those? And I do. I don't know about you, April, but I have definitely done them.
They're great. I've done them in so many cities, San Francisco, all kinds of places. It's a great way to get an overview of a place. Yes. Like the first time I went to Paris, that's the very first thing I did, is and even just a public, do some research. Some of the, like Rick Steves had recommended a particular city bus, and he's like, just go get on the bus and ride it all the way to the end and until they kick you off. And so that's what we did. And we kind of got the lay of the land, the neighborhoods, and got to see like, oh yeah, we want to come back here. It was a great way on the first day to get our feet wet a little bit.
And that's what I think. I think those hop on and hop off buses are fantastic for orientating yourself. And especially, I had someone ask me recently about, she got kind of planted in a city for work and she didn't have time to research it. And so she was disappointed in her experience, because when she left after a day or two, that she realized, I could have done this and I could have done that. And she didn't really know what was there. And so I would tell you that the hop on, hop off buses are perfect for that experience. So if you've not had time to figure out what to do here, get on one of those. They'll tell you all the stuff that there is to do and places to go. So highly encourage those hop on, hop off buses.
Oh, I love them.
And when you said the public transportation, I want to bring up the Staten Island Ferry, because the Staten Island Ferry is fantastic in New York. It's the cost of a metro ticket, which is like $1. It goes out to Staten Island. Nothing super fantastic there, although if somebody messages me, I'll tell you the best pizza. Actually, I'll tell you, it's Pier 76. That's the name of the place. Absolutely best pizza in New York that I've had, and it was on Staten Island. But when you go out on that ferry, it goes past the Statue of Liberty, you're out past the city, so you can get that beautiful photograph of the city island. It's a great thing to do late in the evening when the sun is going
I was
down.
just thinking that exactly. I
Perfect.
love the hop on, hop off bus, like San Francisco, same thing. And I always encourage, like, if you have a camera, like, write it up on the top and like go back and take it like right at sunset. You can get some amazing pictures from the top of the hop on, hop off bus, and at a viewpoint you wouldn't normally get on
Right,
foot or walking. Now
right.
you're up higher and you can just see such amazing views from the
Oh, that's
bus.
funny because my mom and I also took the boat ride in Paris, and for whatever
Oh
reason, when we bought it
yeah.
late in the afternoon, they said, okay, well, this is also good for the next day. So the ticket was good for full 24 hours, and it really just goes up and down the river, right? So we really just took advantage of it. We got up in the morning, went down there, and hopped on the boat. It's beautiful. So it
Oh,
was
it's
sort of like a
gorgeous.
hop on, hop off boat, as long as you
Right.
used it within that time. So we hopped from one little touristy place to the other and just enjoyed the transportation. The journey itself is fun, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yes on the hop on, hop off
Yes. I think
buses.
we both I think we both highly recommend the hop on,
Do
hop
it.
off buses or check out the boats. I mean, just do
Right.
it. And it's a very economical way to get a lot more out of your trip, especially if you, like you said, maybe you're in a city for work. It's a great way to take advantage of your time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't take them when I know the city and I know what I'm doing. I'm like, no, I'm going to spend my time doing the things I know. But if I need to discover or I'm not sure, in Washington, D.C., my daughter and I bought 2 days of tickets for the hop on, hop off bus. On the second day, it was so cold, we were freezing. So we stopped, bought hot chocolate, got on the back of the bus and rode it for an hour. And we
Oh,
just like
yeah.
warmed up and enjoyed the view basically. So
Right. Exactly.
we were warm and we didn't have to go sit in the hotel room because we were too cold. We just sat back there and drank our hot chocolate. So
Oh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's
yeah.
excellent. And then I think we had one more question
Okay.
for both of us. Are you worried about places where they don't speak your language? And that's from Shelby. Thanks for Shelby for sending in your question. Language.
Language. No, I'm not. That doesn't typically bother me. Yeah, I've not, I mean, obviously you want to learn a little of the language if you can, but I've not been, we are lucky, so lucky speaking English that most countries have that. Um,
Right.
at
And I
least
think
some.
for, yeah, I think that's the best. I mean, we, English has become the kind of, but I think it's best to always learn a few words, like if I'm going to
Sure.
go to France, learn, please, thank you, some basic, because it's just opening the door to showing respect and
Sure.
friendliness. And,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
it
The
would
more
never stop me from going somewhere.
no, it would never, me either. As a matter of fact, I find that another interesting challenge, right? When you're like, oh, I don't
Yeah.
know the
Right.
language and I'm gonna have to like get creative and write down, draw pictures, point my finger. It's an experience to try to figure out things like where's the bathroom or how much does this
Right.
cost or all the things that you possibly need to know. So that's never concerned me. I know when I went to Vietnam, I was
No, and I think
concerned about that. Go ahead.
I think a lot of people for their first trip to Europe, but I remember at a travel show several years ago, and I know one of our other travelers, Sheila, speaks about this too, is like you listen to someone like Rick Steves and he shows you slides and definitely shows you that don't let the language be a
Right.
barrier. There's always that international, like, words for bathroom and things like that. And look at the pictures and the signs and
Right.
just go and do it. I think don't let that hold you back,
No, and most people are super friendly and accommodating. And then one of the things I've found is a lot of times I go to a country where I speak very little of their language, but they're so eager to learn English.
Right.
So they're excited that they have someone to, speak English with. So as long as you said, you're respectful, you know a few words, you're not just expecting people to speak English to you or speak your language. It's a great experience. The challenge of the language barrier
Yeah,
is
exactly.
is a fun thing. I would never let that stop me from going anywhere ever.
No, never.
So
Exactly.
that's
Hey,
all the
well,
questions we have.
yeah, thanks
Yeah.
everyone for your questions. And please, in the description, please drop us some
Yes.
more questions, or if you have a place that you want to see us chat with someone, or you've been somewhere, we're always looking to interview and chat with new travelers. So check that out.
Yeah, wonderful. This has been so much fun. I hope we get more questions. Okay.
Yeah, yay. Travel with us through real stories with real people.
Yep. See you. Thanks.
See ya. Thanks.